Welcome to Liesl's Artistic Studio. I am really excited to share with you how easy it can be for you to paint this beautiful watercolor Christmas scene. The best part about this piece is that you can paint it in more of a quick, free-handed way, or you can create a more detailed outline to help you out if you need. We have a lot of options here, so let's get started. Let's really quickly talk about some of these outline possibilities first. Now, you can paint this on any size of paper you want. I'm painting mine in more of a square format, but it is totally an option to paint it in a horizontal or vertical format as well, and then you might have a little bit more room to write a Christmas message on here also. I already have a lightly penciled sketch of what I want on here, but I will go over this with you step by step in the easiest way possible so you can follow along to create your own. Because pencil can sometimes be hard to see in these videos, I will be using a thin Sharpie marker for most of this so you can see the lines a little more clearly. Now, the first thing we need here, and really the most important part, is the circle for the Christmas ball. Maybe you're better at freehand drawing circles than I am, but I decided to trace my circle using just an ordinary paper cup. You, of course, can use whatever you'd like to make yours. The thing to look out for is the size that you want it to be. I'm going to draw this part in pencil because I may need to erase a few lines in just a minute. Then after I've got this circle or ball drawn, then I'll draw the top part of the bauble, the metal piece with a little circle hook on top of that. And then I'll draw a string stemming up from that. Really, this is all you need to actually paint this piece. If you'd like to freehand paint the majority of this piece, this is all you need to get started. However, if you would like a little bit more guidance, let's draw the next step. Here I'll add in a handful of small circles for some berries here along the bottom area of the ornament. And the next thing you can add on here are a few simple lines that can serve as a guide for where some pine needles or little branches might be. Again, you can keep this very simple by just drawing in these main center lines and then just freehand painting in the needles, or if you'd rather, you can draw in some of the needle lines as well so you can get an idea of how you might like it to look in the end. Once again, this is a great stopping point that you could end the drawing at and then get into the painting portion right now. Or you can draw a little bit more. The choice is up to you. If you would like to add more, the next thing to add would be to draw in maybe some stem lines for where the pine trees are in the distant background. This is really all you need. You can freehand paint the tree at this point, or, as another option, you're welcome to do a quick outline sketch of the general size and placement of the tree boughs. As you can see, there are a lot of options with how simple or detailed you'd like this drawing to be. The choice is really up to you and your preferences. I will also add in, as a quick side note, I will have this outline available on my Etsy shop as well if you'd rather not take the time to draw any of this at all. I will have this full-size drawing as you see me doing today, as well as card sizes 4x6 and 5x7. I'll leave a link for that in the description of this video. And one last thing here at the bottom of the page to really finish this outline off, I'll add in a few drip marks and then we're ready to get into painting. So here I have my outline sketch drawn very lightly with a pencil onto my watercolor paper. If you're using my Etsy outline, then all you have to do is trace it on using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. And as I said, I'm choosing today to paint this in a square format. This one I've cut down my paper to be an 8" by 8" size, but of course you can paint this on whatever size or shape you like. So let me just pull out my painting supplies really quickly. Here I have my watercolor paints, a paper towel, and some clean water. Next up, we just need a couple of brushes. I'll be using my personally designed Cadmium brushes for this today. I think I'll pull out the number 6 brush and the number 1 rigger. Now these brushes are completely sold out right now, but there is a chance that Cadmium will let me put out a second batch if there's enough interest. If you'd like to be notified if these brushes become available again, you can click the link that I have in the description of this video to sign up. And as a side note, any of the other products you see me using today will also be listed in the description of this video. Now that my paper is taped down with artist tape, we are ready to get started. One last supply I may use on this piece today is a bit of masking fluid. Now this is optional, but it definitely helps a little bit if you'd like to give this a try. Along with the masking fluid, I also have a small old brush to use with it so I don't risk ruining one of my nicer brushes. I've put a little bit of liquid soap in the bristles of this brush to help clean out this fluid later. Unfortunately, I ruined a brush or two before I learned this trick, so I highly recommend it. So the first thing I'll paint with this masking fluid is this one little pine branch that sort of overlaps the ornament. Now, if you don't want to use masking fluid or don't have it, then don't worry about this part. I'm choosing to do this so that these pine needles will be a little lighter in value compared to the ornament, making them stand out a little bit. But it is totally an option to paint it darker than the ornament as well. Next up, I'll put a little bit of masking fluid on the round berries here on the page as well. Once again, this is optional. You can just paint around these instead. I just found it helped make the painting process a little bit easier for me. Now, you may notice that I tried painting a little bit of masking fluid under the ornament as well. My thinking was that this would help just when I began painting the ornament, but I actually don't recommend adding the fluid right here. I discovered that I needed to actually take this part off when I was going to paint in the pine branches, but it was sort of connected to the fluid on the berries, which I didn't want to remove yet, so that was a little bit tricky. So just don't paint the fluid right under the ornament like I did, and you'll be just fine. I am also going to paint a small circle of this fluid on the left side of the ornament as well to help create a nice bright highlight area later. All right, we need to let that fluid dry completely before we can paint over the top of it. So while we wait, let's talk about colors. Now, you of course can choose to use whatever colors you'd like. You are the artist here. I'm choosing to use sort of a dulled down sage or grayish green that will allow the red in this painting to really stand out more. This is my little practice piece that I tried out some designs, techniques, and colors on. If I ever cut my paper to be smaller than what it comes in, I always save my scrap pieces of paper that I can use as test pieces later. On this other side here, I actually also practiced some techniques for the candy cane piece that I put out last week. These little scrap pieces come in handy for me. Now, I actually have a few colors that I might need already on my tray from my painting from last week, so I'm just going to freshen those up a little bit. First, we have just some pure cadmium red. Then down below, I have a darker shadow red color, which is a mixture of cadmium red with some alizarin crimson to not only darken it up a little bit, but also keep some vibrancy in the color. And then I'll add in just a touch of ivory black to darken the value even more. In fact, while I've got a little bit of this red color still in my brush, I may take a little bit more ivory black and make an even darker red off to the side here as well. In fact, it's more of a black with a hint of red to it, I guess. We won't need much of this color, I don't think, but now we have it just in case. I don't think my fluid is quite dry yet, so before we start painting in the red ornament, let's grab just a small amount of raw sienna, or if you have it, maybe even a gold or a metallic color, and quickly paint in the top metal piece to the ornament. I don't know what it's called, so you can let me know in the comment section what that is. But anyway, I'll just use the rigger to quickly paint in a base layer of this color, and then I'll grab a little bit of maybe some burnt umber to add in a bit of shadow color. I'm kind of focusing this on the outer edges of the space and maybe nearer to the bottom. Nothing too complicated or fancy. In fact, if you want, you can come back in here when it's dry and add some more detailed vertical lines to this part to give it some creases, whatever you decide. Okay, I think at this point we can start painting in the ornament. I'll switch over to the number 6 brush now and begin painting the entire area with water first. And if you didn't use the masking fluid to cover the berries that may overlap the ornament, then paint around the berries. Then we'll begin adding in the red color to the ornament while the wash of water is still wet. We'll start with more of a watery or light cadmium red and begin painting it around that little circle area of masking fluid, but not totally right up to it yet. I'm leaving just a little bit of white wet space in here as well. I'll just paint it around and around until we have a nice circle of color. After I've got this bit of color in here, then I'll wet and dry my brush and use the damp brush to gently soften and spread the color a little bit closer to the masking fluid circle that will become the highlight area later. Next up, we'll add in a darker, more concentrated cadmium red that can move farther down into the ornament. The wet on wet technique is key with painting this ornament today. It's really important that you get enough water on here initially so that it stays a little wet while we start adding in all of these colors and layers. You may also need to work a little more quickly here so that it doesn't start to dry out too fast. Now let's add in some of the darker shadow red color. With this color, I'm not actually taking it fully to the edge of the ornament though. To make this look a little bit more realistic, it's key to have what's called reflected light on the ornament. This is the area where the light from other sources bounces off and reflects back onto the ball, making sort of a dull highlight within the shadow area. If you find that you've kind of lost that highlight spot, wet and dry your brush off and use the damp bristles to sort of swipe some of that color out of that spot. If you need to, you can also use a damp brush to help soften or blend the light and dark reds together a little bit. Be cautious with this though. You don't want to overwork this area with this method. All right, I really like how this is turning out. It gives the appearance of it being 3D, round, and shiny, but I may actually add just a touch of this really dark black-red color right at the very bottom of the ornament, and maybe spreading into the darkest core shadow area as well. Okay, awesome job. Now, I have let the ornament dry just a little bit before I've moved on, but let's go ahead and paint in some of the background trees next. Like I said at the beginning, I kind of want my green color to be a little bit dulled down to really make the ornament pop. So for my color here, I'm just mixing up some Hooker's green with a little bit of ultramarine blue for a nice blue-green color. And then to dull it down, I'm adding in some ivory black. It's always a good idea to test out mixed colors on a scrap piece of paper to make sure that it's what you want before you start putting it on your page. Now that I've got my color ready to go, I can begin painting in the background pine trees. These first two trees I want to be very light in value, so to help with that without having to add water to my entire mixed up color, I just put a little bit of paint on my brush and then dip the tip of my brush into the water. Now my brush has a hint of color with extra added water without having to mix it up on my tray. Then I'll go ahead and paint in the first background tree. Some of you may have chosen just to draw a line for the trunk of the tree, so now here is the chance to use some of your artistic freedom and paint this in a free-handed way or however you'd like. I have more of an outline on my tree to follow, so I will use that as a base guide. However, I am not going to follow that exactly either. I'm going to play it by ear and add what I feel looks good or what my picture needs. These should not be super time-consuming or complicated trees though. I'm not worrying about painting a lot of details here. Since these are in the background, they should not be the focal point to the picture, so I'm really just painting them in almost a silhouette form with just one light wash of color. Now, as I get painting closer to the ornament, I really want to fade my color out even lighter in value to create sort of a misty look. So I'm going to get a little bit more water on my brush and kind of paint that color out even more so that it almost disappears. In fact, if you ever feel like the color is just a little too dark, you can use your paper towel to dab some of that color off. All right, let's go ahead and paint in the next tree now. I'll paint this in the same way, once again keeping the colors very light in value and fading it out more as I get closer to the bottom. The next two trees that we're going to paint will be a little bit darker in value than these, so just keep that in mind as you go. While I'm already painting this nice light watery green, I think I'm going to go ahead and quickly paint in some of these little drip marks or puddles here at the bottom of the ornament as well. I hope you're enjoying and finding this tutorial fun and helpful so far. If you do like my painting and teaching style, then I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already. I have some more great Christmas tutorials coming up in the next few weeks that you're really not going to want to miss. All right, well done. We need to let all of that dry just a little bit before moving on. So while we wait, I'm going to switch over to the rigger brush again, take a touch of this dark black-red color and paint in the little hook or circle at the top of the ornament, as well as the string that is attached to it. Okay, I think we can go ahead and paint in the two other background trees now. And like I said a little while ago, we want these trees to be a little darker in value than the first two. But we will paint them in the same way as before, remembering to fade out the color to sort of a mist down near the bottom. You'll notice that I skip around a lot with this painting. I just want to be able to stay productive and keep painting as I wait for areas to dry rather than continually stopping and starting over again. Even though I didn't do this today, it's always an option to pull out a hairdryer to speed up the drying process if you want to do that as well. Now, I haven't been painting these trees using the wet on wet technique. It seems to be working fine just to put the color straight on here. But if you find your color is streaking or not spreading very well, you absolutely can use the wet on wet technique if you need to. All right, well done. That is a good portion of this painting finished. Only a couple of things left. Next up, I want to paint in the pine needle branches at the bottom of the page. Seeing as these are in the foreground of the picture, I want the value of these to be even darker than the tree silhouettes we just painted. So it may be a good idea to pull out your rigger brush and just quickly test out your color once again and make sure it's dark enough. If you need to, you can always add in a touch more color to make it a little more concentrated and darken it even more. All we have to do now is paint in some long, thin pine needles stemming out from under the ornament. There's not anything too difficult about this, especially if you have a rigger brush like this. This brush paints in amazingly thin lines. They are so easy to do. The biggest tip I have for you here is to start painting the lines from the inner part of the needle to the outer part. It is just a normal tendency to start a line out a little thicker, and then as you pull the brush outward, we tend to move a little quicker, as well as pull up on the brush, creating a thinner line at the end of the stroke. A couple of other things: if you didn't use masking fluid to cover up the berries in this area, you do need to be a little more careful to go around the berries with these lines. I love having the masking fluid for this because I can just paint on these full strokes right over the top of the berries, and I don't have to worry about that. And lastly, depending on how you did your initial drawing may change how or where you paint these lines in a little bit. But even though I actually had most of my lines for these pine needles drawn out, this is just a guide. I am painting the lines really wherever I see fit. There's no rule that says you have to stick to the lines you drew. Paint these branches in wherever you feel like they need to go, even if that means deviating a little bit from the original drawing. All right, well done. This looks pretty good if I do say so myself. While I've got this rigger brush out and in my hand, I'm going to add a few lines or drip marks here down at the bottom of the page. I'm going to water a bit of this paint down though to make it a little lighter in value. I don't want them to become the focus of this picture. This is just a fun accent to add some interest. Moving on, we're going to start taking off the masking fluid to finish this painting off. I'll start with the circle dot of masking fluid right on the ornament. Now you can leave this just how it is if you don't want to risk messing anything up here, but I feel like this is a pretty harsh and hard line, and I kind of want to soften the edge of this circle up a little bit. I'll just take some water and then use my brush to sort of scrub at the hard line here. Then I'll use my paper towel to dab the color and water off. Depending on the brands of paints you're using, mine tend to sort of stain the paper pretty good, so you may need to do this 2 or 3 times. But this really kind of just softens up that hard line and makes it blend in and look a little bit more natural. Next up, I'll just use an eraser and take off the masking fluid on the berries down below, as well as this one little pine branch that spreads up into the ornament. You can rub this off with your fingers or just use a good eraser. Just make sure that your paint is fully dry before doing this, otherwise you risk smearing or smudging your painting, which is super frustrating, especially when you're this far into it. In fact, while I've got my eraser out, I may even just erase any other lines that might be showing or standing out as well. Okay, first up, let's just take some light watered down green paint and quickly paint in the last little pine branch here. The key is to either have it be lighter than the ornament or darker than the ornament so that it will stand out a little bit. Since I used the fluid to block off the color from the space, it's pretty easy just to paint it a nice light color of green. Now, if you want to, you can switch back to the number 6 brush again and begin painting in the berries. This brush does have a fine point to it, so it's pretty good at getting into the small spaces, but if you need to, feel free to pull out a smaller brush if it works better for you. In fact, I may go ahead and pull out a number 3 round to make this process a little bit easier. There are a lot of different ways to paint red berries. I think I've shown several techniques in many of my tutorials, so really you can just paint these in whatever way works for you. Today I'm choosing to keep it fairly simple. I'll start with a little bit of cadmium red and paint it along the bottom half of the berry. I'll rinse and dry my brush off and use the damp brush to spread the color to the upper half of the berry, going around a circle highlight. Now, you can leave it just like this if you want, or if you'd like to add in a bit of extra dimension, you can take just a touch of the darker red and paint a small line or section about halfway through the berry to create that core shadow. At this point, I'll go ahead and paint in the rest of the berries in the same way until they're all complete. Then, if you want to really add a fun accent to this piece, you can even add in a few splatter marks. I'm just going to take my number 6 brush, load it with green paint, and then cover up any areas that I don't want the splatter marks to go using a scrap piece of paper. For me, I'm mainly blocking off the red ornament. Then I'll just tap my brush onto another until I get a few splatter marks on my page. If you really want to go the extra mile here, you can even pull out some white gouache or acrylic paint, water it down a tiny bit, and use that white color to make some splatter marks around the top area of the page as well. These are kind of fun to focus on the background trees because it almost gives the appearance like it's snowing gently in the background. As you can see, there are a lot of options to this piece, from the colors to the outline to freehand painting to the masking fluid to even the splatter marks. You really can make this piece your own. This was so much fun to paint. I truly hope you enjoyed this painting. I can't wait to share more Christmas pieces with you in the coming weeks. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll also consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.